Hi, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is Listening Beyond the Soundbites. Joining me in studio today is Michael Pieciak, who is our Vermont State Treasurer. Mike, welcome.
Yeah, thanks,
again.
Pat. It's a pleasure to be back.
I love having you on. You've done so much great things as treasurer, as our 31st treasurer. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
I've known a few of them over the years.
Yeah,
but,
we've had some great ones and ones that have served for a long time. We're very fortunate to follow in the footsteps of.
I hear really good things from the folks that work with you, so I have my little sources around state government. But let me just give you, I'm going to read a little bit of something. Before he was elected treasurer in 2022, Mike served 6 years as the commissioner of the Department of Financial Regulations under Governors Peter Shumlin and Phil Scott. And as we all remember, during the COVID-19 pandemic, Mike served on the pandemic response team and was always, thank you, on the TV with Dr. Levine and the governor, giving us updates on where we were with COVID and how many people sick and maybe passing away. It was very calming to see you all on TV. And even if it was sort of bad news, I always felt that you're on it, you're watching it, you're doing what you can. So it was a good thing to be on so often.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I mean, thinking about like what you learned from lessons in communication, but certainly if the news was good or if the news was bad, we said, we gave the same metrics and we were transparent, and I think it did build trust. Yeah. And I do think communicating regularly in those kind of moments also built trust because, to your point, people were really anxious and wanting to know what was going on. Right. So being able to provide that, even if it had to be done almost every day at the beginning, was really important.
Well, and because I never missed it. I always, time for the, because I wanted to know. And I just thought that was really a great way to reach out to people.
Although as it got later on, as the pandemic wore on, and we continued to be on, and they would continue to cut away to WCAX, we cut away to the press conferences. One time, I don't know if it was because I myself had COVID or was worried I had COVID, but there was a time where I participated in the press conference remotely. So I was sort of waiting for it to start on the TV, and then I was going to join. So I was waiting for it to start on the TV, and Price is Right started, and I kind of got into the, and then they cut away to the press conference, and I said, well, now I know why we're getting so many complaints that people want to watch The Price is Right.
Pay attention, there you go. And Vanna White's still there.
Yeah.
I can't believe it. Anyway, before he began into public service, Mike practiced in New York City and at Downs, Racklin, and Martin, and we just chatted about that out in the hallway. That was it still is a wonderful law firm.
Yeah, no doubt.
It's one of our biggest and best, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I was just there for they had an anniversary party a couple of weeks ago, and I was able to just tell a number of people, Paul Lodi, Peter Cunin, Will Dodge, folks that I'd worked with previously, and that they really were really important mentors professionally in terms of just witnessing how they conducted themselves and how they went about serving their clients and the broader.
When I was at the Merchants Bank, there was the first place I had a full-time job here in Vermont when I moved here, and we used Downs, Racklin, and Martin. Heather Briggs, and so I wrote down in my notes, Heather Briggs, Bill Gilbert, and Alan Martin. Those are the three.
Alan,
three I knew.
And then, of course, Dudley Davis, who was the president of Merchants Bank. Right. His daughter, Kathy Davis, is a partner at Downs, Racklin.
That's right. Yeah. Because I worked for Dad for a lot. They should write a book about that. When he shook your hand, it was like the old time. Yeah. That was it. It was like locked and loaded. You just shook Dudley's hand. Everything was in place, no paperwork, which sort of got him into trouble with the FDC. But
well, it was the way of the community banking. Back in the day, you knew the person, you knew their character, you knew their ability to pay back, even if it wasn't it wasn't based only on their financial ability to pay back. It was, will they be able to be successful because of their character, and will they prioritize paying back the bank?
And I will say he was a good guy at spotting those things. Yeah. He was a real expert, because even when he hired staff, I have never seen that staff, the management team that I work with, still gets together for lunch.
Oh, nice.
After all these years.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a tribute to Dudley's hiring ability. He knew who he wanted to hire and what traits that he wanted from them.
Yeah.
And one time, we have to talk about you, but one time there was a guy down in the lobby causing all kinds of trouble. I mean, really obnoxious. Dudley went down and threw him out.
Oh, really?
And said, "Take your money."
Oh,
And
interesting.
said, "My staff, nobody gets paid that kind of money to take that
To deal with
abuse."
this. Yeah.
You don't think everybody loved him after that?
Yeah, exactly.
That was great. So anyway, we're here to talk about Treasury. And you have been focusing on a lot of things. Maybe you can sort of tell us a little bit about some of the new projects that you've started, Vermont Saves, and
Yeah.
all the things that you have done so much since you've been there.
Yeah, well, we have a great team, and we've been working with the legislature very closely
Yep.
and gotten a lot of good response on some of our initiatives. Vermont Saves was the
Yep.
first one that we did back in 2023. We're really happy the legislature supported that. It was a unanimous vote from the legislature to pass Vermont Saves. It's now up and running, fully operational. A couple of big steps that happened along the way to get it up and running in 2 years. You know, we had
What is the exact? Just tell the
to
folks
say what
that-
it is. Yeah.
Just
So
what
the
it is,
problem.
'cause I know, but I don't know. if
Yeah,
they
the
do.
problem we were trying to solve for was that there are tens of thousands of Vermonters who work for a small business or work for a nonprofit who don't have access to retirement.
Right.
You know, they don't have a pension, they don't have a 401k. And all the data shows that if you don't have access to a retirement program through your employer, you just don't save for retirement. So you're on pace to have a significantly less dignified retirement, much less financially secure than your working years. You're going to be dependent on the state, on the federal government for benefits, on your neighbors. So it's not a great way to retire and to live out those golden years. You want to be able to provide people an opportunity to save, to have dignity in retirement, to have financial resources in retirement, to be less dependent on the state or on the federal government. So Vermont Saves is trying to fill that gap and do it in a low-cost way. There's no cost to the employer to participate, but the program does require an employer who does not provide a retirement program to participate in Vermont Saves.
And you said mostly nonprofits, right?
A lot of nonprofits,
'cause-
but a lot of small businesses too. You know, if you're a business that has 8 people or 10 people,
Right.
Particularly if you're a restaurant or sort of, a cafe,
Right.
it's pretty expensive to have a 401k plan. So it's not a matter of, an employer doing something wrong. Like these are things that are expensive and challenging across the board, but particularly for a small organization or a small business.
And you sure need it when you retire.
Yeah, no doubt.
You think when you look at the numbers, oh, I have plenty.
Yeah, you need a lot.
But you do, and I don't think I didn't realize it. I said, oh, well, this is good. And it just isn't.
And we're living longer.
It's never enough.
And we have more health needs in retirement,
Right.
so there's a lot of reason to have, you want to have a strong financial base. So with Vermont Saves, we passed it, and then we said, geez, we got to operationalize this. And we really, in Vermont, we're probably too small to, on our own, set up the program. So we looked at the state of Colorado, and we ended up partnering with Colorado, who had partnered also with Maine and Delaware.
Wow.
And together, we established and operationalized the program here in Vermont. Since then, Nevada has come on board, and I believe
kidding.
Minnesota is going to as well. And what's that allowed us to do is leverage the populations of all of those states
Right.
for the benefit of Vermonters. So we, first of all, had a contract that we probably wouldn't have been able to get on our own because of this. The contract that we got was lower cost, and it's going to continue to be even lower cost in the future as we have more assets under management, as more people are saving.
Nice.
So that's all good. We were able to launch the program earlier this year. As of March, that was sort of the deadline for employers to sign up. We have over 1,000 employers that are signed up, about 4,300 people that are saving right now, and that number is growing, and we're doing things to try to get that number higher. But of the 4,300 people that are saving, they've collectively saved about $3 million. Just started, and they're adding hundreds of thousands of dollars collectively, every pay period. But the thing that I'm really excited about is when you look at the 4,300 people, a lot of them are younger people. So 55% of them are under the age of 40, 30% of them are under the age of 30. So it really is skewing younger, which is one of the categories of folks that we were worried about that don't have access to retirement. because they work, you know, in retail, or they work at a restaurant, they work in a nonprofit, or they're, you know, whatever it is. They're just at a point in their career where maybe they haven't figured out what their path is. So they're missing really important years in terms of saving and compounding and having that money grow.
But is it portable? Like, say if they were working for one of these states and then came to some state that had its own New York, is it portable? Does that money follow them?
Yeah, money will follow them.
Just like it does in our
just like a 401k.
Yeah.
The money goes into a Roth IRA, so it's as if they set up their own Roth IRA. It will follow them. And it's portable in the sense that if they go from one restaurant to another restaurant, and they're both in Vermont Saves, it'll just port right over to the program.
Who's sort of you must take care of Vermonters, and then report into who? I mean, who's the big,
Colorado,
big kahuna in the sky here?
Yeah, so Colorado's the organizing state of this partnership, and then they have a vendor called Vestwell, which is the vendor that we use as well. That's our benefit. So Vestwell has provided us sort of those kind of services now for this Vermont Saves program, for the ABLE program, which I know we'll talk about, and then also for the 529 program now that's administered from VSAC. They're providing service to all three of those important programs.
That's great.
Yeah.
I love it. And is it the same 5-year vesting? Do they do that? I don't know if you know those details, but
yeah, no, there's no vesting because it's your money, and that was really important because
I like that.
we are requiring businesses to sign up, right? And then employees, it's an opt-out, so you are in unless you opt out. And that was intentional because we wanted to sort of nudge people to making a better financial decision.
Yeah.
It's really hard sometimes to save for the future because there's so many expenses right now.
Michael, somebody in the sky knows when I have extra money in there. When something happens.
That's when your car breaks down.
Yes, exactly. It's very strange.
Yeah, no doubt.
I don't know who plans that, but.
And it's a little inertia. Like if you're not saving, it's hard to get in the habit of saving. But once you start saving, it's hard to get out of that habit. So the idea is to nudge people, you know, with a relatively small amount of their paycheck going to Vermont Saves. It starts at 5%, and it will go up every year. They can change that. It could be as low as 1% if they wanted to. They could do 10%. But it gets them in that habit of saving. Now, let's say 5 months down the road, they have their car breakdown. And they say, boy, I need that $1,000 I put aside. Because it's a Roth IRA, there's no tax or penalty if they go in and take the money out and get a distribution. There's only a tax on their investments that they've earned on that $1,000. So it actually,
that's a good deal.
Yeah, so we don't, you know, we want people to be able to put money aside and let it grow for the long term. But, you know, reality is sometimes different than that.
Yeah, something will always happen.
Yeah, so this was a good, for us, I was particularly appreciated that point because you have total control of your money. And if you need it for whatever reason, you can get it. So it sort of secondarily serves as an emergency savings account. And as you know, so many Vermonters just are not in a position to cover an emergency, a financial emergency when it comes up.
Social Security does not do it.
No.
Because I hear about people actually living off of Social Security. That's tough.
Yeah, no doubt.
I don't know how they do that. I wouldn't be able to, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, Vermont, a lot of states, I mean, we're dealing with real issues on costs and pricing. In Vermont, we have, everywhere's dealing with inflation. But, you know, between 23 and 2024, Vermont had the highest rate of inflation increase driven by our housing costs. But it's things like, you know, at the grocery store, I feel like you can't leave the grocery store without spending $25 or $30, even if you're going for one or two things, right? Let alone if you're doing a full shopping at the store, you know. So it you know, it's the realities of life are making it hard for people to you know, to be able to afford to stay here.
And what's funny, when I first moved here, I have a shopping list in my head for that weekly shopping I do.
Yeah.
I just buy the same thing. When I moved up to Vermont, I was in Bristol and I went to the Grand Union and I just bought, I wasn't paying attention to the price, I just bought what I usually buy. And it was much cheaper here than it was where I lived in New York.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's that way anymore.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
Because I went, whoa.
Yeah, no doubt.
That's cool.
And my dad, I asked my dad recently because, you know, he moved to Brattleboro in 1970 with my mom, and I asked him, you know, he's a CPA, and he was a CPA at the time, and I asked him how much he made, you know, because he made $200 a week, he said, about $10,000 a year.
Yeah.
And I asked,
Wow.
did my mom work and ever like did she need to work? He said no, like not really. And they had one child at that time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thinking about 1970 in Brattleboro, being able to support a whole family on $10,000.
We had a big party when my father finally got promoted and was making over $10,000.
Yeah.
We had this huge party.
Yeah.
And he was happy. Everybody was happy. Myself, my sister, and all the friends were so patting him on the back. And $10,000 was different, and we lived very well.
Yeah, and obviously, inflation, everything goes up. But the point, I guess, is like wages have not kept up with the cost of all these other things that have gone up. We were just looking at housing prices, for example, the last 10 years. Housing prices in Vermont have gone up 113%, but wages have only gone up about 40%. So, things are becoming more expensive.
My big issue is food insufficiency, but we shall not chat about that on this program. In a farmer state, a dairy state, and people are dealing with food insufficiency.
Well, you said we wouldn't talk about it.
Well,
but
no, you can. I just meant there's so many other things.
My mom, when she moved to Brattleboro, one of the things she got really involved in the community generally, but she got really involved in issues around hunger, and she eventually founded a soup kitchen in 1982, St. Bridget's Kitchen, and their first, they started on St. Patrick's Day because St. Bridget was from Ireland and my mom was Irish, but they served like 12 people the first day they opened, right? And but they knew that there was an unmet need in the community, and unfortunately, not only was there an unmet need, but there was a growing need over the decades, and they serve 45,000 meals a year now at St. Bridget's Kitchen. So she worked there for 40 years as the director.
God bless her. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, because even the people that I've told, Sue Minter before she retired, and Mary Moulton, the people that go to the food kitchens have changed.
Yeah.
It's just a whole different dynamic of people coming right from work with suits and going in and getting what they can for their family. It's just.
My mom would always tell me, particularly recently, that what she would see a lot was there were a lot of older people coming to food to her kitchen, and that they, you didn't hear a lot from them, or they were complaining, or they didn't tell people about their circumstances. So her point was always there's this very silent group of people, the silent generation, that won't ask for help, but they're in desperate need of help in Vermont.
They really don't like to do that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. God bless her. I had down on my notes the 10% in Vermont program. That one's cool.
Yeah.
Did you talk about that?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we when I got in office, I'd run a campaign, and we went to every town in Vermont, all 251 towns.
Wow. Yes, it's 51.
Well,
now.
it was 52 now, so when I started, it was 51,
Oh,
and
really?
then Essex, and Essex Junction and the town of Essex.
Oh, because the 250 Club said they're going to keep 250.
Yeah.
They weren't going to do 1 and 2.
Yeah. Oh no. Well, it was always 251.
Oh, it was,
and then they're going to keep 251, even though it's 252.
Okay. We tried to do that. But
Yeah.
anyway.
Well, it's worth doing. I mean, and I think as somebody that was coming in, running statewide, and going to hopefully be successful and take office, visiting every state, every part of the state, and every town in the state was really eye-opening. Even though I was born in Brattleboro and spent most of my life in Vermont, there were a lot of places I hadn't been to and hadn't seen and talked to people. So you got a really good sense of what was going on and what the challenges were. And housing was the challenge that every part of the state kept coming back to, that there was a shortage of housing for a variety of different reasons. But some of the challenges were that post-pandemic, prices had gone up, labor costs had gone up, supplies costs had gone up, interest rates were really high, and projects that were conceived of prior to the pandemic or during the pandemic all of a sudden were 10 or 20% more expensive, and they couldn't be financed at the higher interest rates and work and make sense and be successful. So this 10% Vermont program was a program that existed in our office, but we wanted to expand it and have it be laser focused on housing and supporting housing. So we were able to expand it by about $100 million, and then prioritized housing and housing development as the top priority for the money. We put out an RFP back in 2023, and we were able to deploy about $84 million of that money. It has supported about 1,300 units of housing across Vermont, about 850 new units, and then about 400 or 500 units that were saved or prevented from going offline, enhanced in some way from the funds as well. So it's been a very successful program. It's been an opportunity for us to take the state's balance sheet, takes the state's resources, and invest it directly into communities in Vermont and solving one of our biggest challenges, which is the shortage of housing.
That's great. That's great. Speaking of when you're borrowing, how's our credit rating these days? Has it managed to, because of pension, and there was another reason too, I think.
Yeah, we're holding steady, right? We just got our most recent report from Moody's, one of the 3 credit agencies that rank Vermont, and we're AA plus basically. So that's the second highest. The highest would be AAA.
Right.
A couple of things on that. One of the signs of Vermont's strengths in some ways is that when we go out and do a bond issuance, we still get an interest rate as if we were rated AAA.
Oh.
So the market is giving us the benefit of being AAA. That's a good sign for a lot of ways that the market views Vermont. But when the rating agencies talk about our state, they continue to talk about 2 things: the unfunded pension liability and demographics. So why they're worried about those 2 things? When you put out debt, when you issue bonds, the people that are buying those bonds want to make sure you can pay them back. So when they look at your economy, and your economy fuels your state your state revenues,
right.
and your general fund and your budget and all the things that you'll use to pay those bonds back, they say, hey, well, on the pension side, is the pension going to eat up all your capacity? Like, is it going to grow to such a place that you don't have the ability to pay these bonds back? And then on the demographic side, they say, hey, is that going to impact your economy so much that you don't have the revenues coming into the state? So it's not a matter of, it's not a matter of an expense that's growing, it's a matter of a revenue that's decreasing. So those are the things that they worry about long term. They did recognize in this most recent report that we've made progress on our unfunded pension liability, which was good to see. And I think if we keep going in the direction that we are, in a couple of years, we'll be in a really good position to request a rating increase.
Right.
The other thing,
I remember when they took it down, it was only one level, but boy, everybody went crazy, and rightly so.
Yeah.
That's not a good sign.
No doubt. And that was about 2018, if I remember correctly. And the pension reform effort started in 2021.
And are they happy with what we did? Are you happy with? I mean,
Yeah.
We've done a bill. Everybody that I've talked to that was involved in legislation, they're done. And I'm like, nah, maybe not. Maybe a little tweaking here and there.
Well, we'll see. I'm happy with it in terms of its outcome and its stability of the system.
Yeah.
There's 3 pension systems for the state. There's the municipal system, the teachers, and then the state employees.
Right.
The municipal workers, we manage all 3 of them, but the municipal workers, the backstop is the local governments. So if they are not funded, if they're in a financially challenging situation, the state of Vermont's not the backstop for that pension, it's the local municipalities. So we obviously want it to be well funded, and we care a lot about it, but ultimately the state of Vermont's not responsible.
Interesting.
But the other 2, we are responsible for the teachers and the state employees. So that's where we spend a lot of our time and focus when we're thinking about the impact on the budget.
I think the municipals are in good shape, just for those listening.
Yeah, it's not that they're in...
they're in good shape.
Yeah.
I remember that discussion in the legislature.
Yeah.
They're pretty solid.
Yeah, their funded ratio. So the funded ratio is the metric that I think is useful to talk about. The funded ratio is basically like how much do you have, if you have to pay out $100 in benefits from your system, how much of that $100 do you have now? And for the teacher system, it was $50. We were about 50% funded. For the state employees, it was about $60. We're 60% funded. The municipal was between 70 and 80, and they're on a trajectory to creep back up a little bit. We have them on a good trajectory. But the ones that gave us concern were the state and the teachers, being at 50 and 60%. Post the reforms, and now it's been 4 years of the funded ratios getting better. The teachers are up to over 60%.
Great.
And the state employees are at 72%.
Excellent.
So they're moving in the right direction. Right. And the reforms, not only did it put more money into the system earlier, and it committed everybody to putting more money into the system on an ongoing basis, that helps generate returns, that helps save taxpayers money. Right. But it's just in a virtuous cycle now of people feeling like there's more stability and security there, and that's helpful overall.
Yeah.
And the thing, we did an analysis in January to try to get a sense of how much did this save taxpayers, the pension reform? Like if we didn't have the pension reform and we were putting all the money that was required every year into it, what would that number be? And it came to over $6 billion. So by doing the pension reform,
there's a good number.
yeah, by doing the pension reform, by putting the money in early,
Yep.
by committing to it earlier and more of it on an ongoing basis, it meant that we do not have to come up with about $6 billion that we otherwise would have to make the pensions fully funded.
Okay. And this all came to light. I mean, it's been a problem for a while when they wanted to change the reporting accounting system, right? Where they wanted you to report on unfunded liabilities.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, everybody went, yike.
Yeah, I think there are two big things that happened. One was that, so previously those things would not show up on your financial statement for the state.
Right.
And then they did, and then it showed the state having a negative
Right.
worth, basically,
Right.
right? So there was that, but it was always there. I mean, it wasn't like it wasn't there.
Well,
it
that's
just
what I
didn't
was saying.
show
'Cause I
up.
was on the pension committee when I was commissioner of personnel.
Yeah.
I was on, and I knew we talked about it, but not to the level when you saw it in paper and print in your face.
Yeah.
Everybody kind of went a little
Definitely.
crazy.
And around that same time, one of the big assumptions that needs to be made when you're working with a pension is what they call the assumed rate of return. So it's your expected investment return.
Yeah.
So if you have a really high expected return, then you don't need to put as much money into the system because you're going to be earning all this money, But if your high assumed return rate is not realistic, then you're really just underfunding your system year over year. So we had a much higher assumed rate of return over time, and then the most recent change was from 7.5 down to 7%, and that also caused the unfunded liability on paper to balloon up. But in reality, it was always there because 7.5 is a hard number to hit, but it ballooned up right at the time when you had to report on your financial statement. So both of those things, I remember at the same time, definitely caused some concern.
It's quite exciting being here. Maybe not for you, but watching this stuff was like, whoa, because I think everybody thought, well, the state's never going out of business.
Yeah.
Money's always going to come in and go out and flow. And so what's the big deal?
There
always be able to cover ourselves.
Yeah. So people often give an example, of like buying a home, right? You want to buy your home and pay your mortgage off before you retire, so that when you're in retirement, you're not having to come up with that money, that revenue to make a housing payment. But to your point, the state of Vermont is never going, out of business, if you will. We're never, hopefully, going to retire. We're going to continue to operate as a state. So we'll always be there. But the difference is that, if you can eliminate those unfunded liabilities, like it's going to improve your credit rating, which means you're probably going to get a better interest rate, which is going to save taxpayers money. But we're also putting a lot of money into the system every year to help catch up on the unfunded portion of our liability. So that money would literally be freed up for other uses. And we're talking in the hundreds of millions of dollars. It's not a small number.
Right.
So if we can make good progress and get the systems back closer to 100% funded, it's going to free up a lot of capacity within the state budget.
Oh, that'd be exciting.
Yeah.
That's great. On my notes, you just recently announced a plan to eliminate up to $100 million in medical debt. What was that about? That sounded excellent. I light candles to our benefit system when I listen to my friends that have to buy medical coverage elsewhere.
Yeah, no doubt.
I'm like, oy.
So, this issue is a big one, right? In Vermont, we have a really good coverage in terms of insurance. Like, we have a really low uninsured population, but we have a really high underinsured population. And what that means is, like, a lot of people have a health insurance, but it's a $5,000 or it's a $10,000 deductible. And like we were talking about earlier, people don't have even $500 for an emergency for their car, let alone $10,000 for themselves or their child or loved one.
Right.
So oftentimes they will fall into debt, and it's challenging for them to pay it back. And our position was, there's a whole host of benefits to try to target this amount of money that we're focusing on. There's the financial benefit of eliminating it for that individual, the impact to their personal credit score. There's these health benefits, because when people have medical debt, they're less likely to go see the doctor. They are worried about accumulating even more medical debt. They're worried that their doctor won't see them because they owe them money. So you eliminate that piece of it, and people access healthcare when they need it. So we're targeting money, the debt that has been in the system for a while. It's been 18 months old to 5 years old, and when we're doing debt that's a little bit older, we can purchase it for a penny, literally around a penny on the dollar. So that $100 million number that you cite, we only requested $1 million appropriation to be able to eliminate that much money.
That's a little return on investment.
Yeah, so we're
That's a cool
excited
deal.
about that. And we didn't ask for new taxes or fees. We had $1 million that had been appropriated to our office for another purpose a number of years ago. And we said, let's reuse that for this purpose because we think it'll have a bigger impact on Vermonters. So we're working on getting a contract in place with an entity called Undue Medical Debt. And once that contract is in place, we'll work to start negotiating with our hospital providers in Vermont, buying that debt, and then forgiving it to Vermonters. We expect somewhere around 60,000 Vermonters hold debt that will be eligible for forgiveness.
That's great.
Yeah.
I know my daughter went to a big insurance company, and she had that $10,000.
Yeah.
And when she told me, I was like,
Yeah.
oh, well, we all have to pitch in if something happened. I mean, you have to do that. And I couldn't believe that $10,000 for, and they have even the employee working in the mailrooms.
Yeah.
Where's he going to get, or is she going to get $10,000?
Yeah, no doubt.
Where's my
and that's
daughter
like your
gonna
first
get it?
dollar in, right?
Yeah.
So you have something relatively minor wrong with you that you'd go see your primary care doctor about,
Yeah.
and you're picking that all up. And let's say you can't afford it, and that you don't get the treatment for it, and then it gets worse, and then it gets worse, and then it gets, and then all of a sudden the thing that would have cost, $1,000 visit is now hundreds of thousands in terms of.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what she was telling me her co-workers were doing.
Yeah.
Because who's got that kind of money?
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah.
So you think you have coverage and you have insurance, but it's really in some ways when it's that high deductible, it's almost as if it's
and she said once you get past the 10,000, if
Yeah.
you can, then the coverage is fabulous.
Right.
Because they've saved all this smaller amounts spending in the beginning.
Yeah, exactly.
$10,000. I know where she'd come for it too. And you have to help. What are you going to do? The last time I spoke to you, we were in the State House, I remember. And you were talking about little babies. Babies born.
Yeah.
What happened to that? I was looking. I didn't see anything. Did it pass?
Yeah, baby bonds was the.
Did it?
Well, so where it stands now, I'll just talk about what it is
Yeah,
first.
because I thought that was so cool.
Yeah, and we're still working on it. So baby bonds is this idea that, you're born, so many children, so many people are born into poverty in Vermont and across the country.
Yeah.
And they are born into sort of a generational cycle of poverty. It's not just that they're born into poverty, but maybe it was that their parents were born into poverty, their grandparents. And it's so hard. I think it's always been so hard, but I think it's gotten harder to break out of that cycle in our economy today. So they're born into this, into poverty, and they stay there, and it's hard to break out. So that generational poverty, but also baby bonds was trying to invest in more rural areas of Vermont as well, because more babies are born into poverty in the Northeast Kingdom and Southern Vermont, places that have less population. And we're also trying to figure out how do we retain young people in our state? Like how do we make them interested to stay in Vermont? And how do we make it so that's a little bit easier that they can afford to stay in Vermont as well? So those are the three policy goals of baby bonds. And what it would do is give every child born into poverty $3,200 that would be invested on their behalf. It would grow to 16, 17, 18,000 by the time they're 18, which is when they're first eligible to take the bond, through the age of 30. And if they wait till 30, it's more like 28, 29, 30,000. And then there's 4 eligible uses for the money. So there are some strings attached, if you will. Buying a house in Vermont, you can use it to buy a house in Vermont. You can use it to start a business in Vermont or invest in a business in Vermont, for higher education or job training, or rolling it over into your retirement if you don't want to use one of the other options. So again, the idea is to help people have the means and the resources to be able to break out of generational poverty, to have the money to make a down payment, to have the money to start that small business that you have the idea to start, and pay for your books and pay for your tuition, whatever it might be. And I think about my own experience. I grew up in Brattleboro. I was mentioning my grandparents would put aside a savings bonds.
Oh my goodness, we all had savings bonds back then. I don't hear anybody talking much about
Not as much,
them.
yeah.
No.
And they didn't. It's not like my grandparents did not have a lot of money, right? But they put aside, $100 or $50, or as my birthday, I'd get $100. And there were these savings bonds that were sitting there when I was a kid. And they grew to, maybe just under $10,000 when they matured and everything.
Nice.
And I used that as a down payment the first time I bought a piece of property. So that, for me, was like a baby bond, right? But it was provided to me by my grandparents, and trying to think about the opportunity to expand that to folks that don't have grandparents that are in a position to be able to support them in that way. So we got a pilot project established by the legislature, and we're working on rolling that out, hopefully, in the next 6 months to a year. And we want to focus on the Northeast Kingdom, since that's where the highest rates of childhood poverty are. So we want to do a multi-year pilot that will show the benefits of this kind of a program, and then eventually go back to the legislature and say, this is a project and a program worth funding, because it's going to move the needle on so many individual families, but also individual communities as well.
What's the total cost projected if we really do this statewide?
So if you did it the entire state for children born into poverty, it was about $6 million a year, which wasn't all that much, in my opinion, relative to a $9 billion budget, right? And when you're thinking about investment. But the other way to think about it, which is what how I like to think about it, is that $6 million you put in today, you're not feeling the impact, of course, until 18 years later. It's a longer term investment. But let's say all of those kids that get their baby bond on day one take it out when they get 18 years old. You've now taken that $6 million, and now you're having $25 million of benefit on that end. It's almost like the pension fund. You're putting a certain amount in, and then you're growing it through the investments, and then it's having a much bigger impact on the other side.
And so where is it now? Is it the pilot program is passed?
Yeah.
And then you're going to come back next year?
Well, I think it'll take us a couple of years. It will take us a number of years to see the results of the pilot, but it'll be in the near future.
Well, I thought that was a great idea. And I'm sure a lot of people didn't, because it's a lot of money. But
well,
what a great way to get children on clear footing.
Yeah, exactly right. It's we had a lot of co-sponsors, we had a lot of support for it, but at the end of the day, every year in Vermont's a tight budget year in many ways. So to come up with $6 million of new money is a challenge.
Right. So moving along. That's the first time I've looked at the clock. That's because we were talking here. Fossil fuel investment, I wrote down. What are we doing about that? Because there was a lot of activity last year. I remember one scene in Senate Economic Development that wasn't too good, but they wanted the VPIC to divest from fossil fuels, and I know the former treasurer said she wouldn't do it because those funds were making money for the pension plan, and that was her primary duty, was to make sure that money goes into the plan to keep it going. So
So divestment's an interesting topic, because it's like there's so much that has changed over the last. The first person that ever suggested this in Vermont was Governor Shumlin.
Oh.
It was like 2013 or 14.
Yeah.
I remember it might have been a few years earlier, but he was the first person to suggest it, and he was way ahead of his time in some ways, because it wasn't really something that was in the sort of average financial.
In people's minds.
Yeah. So a lot has changed, and what I mean by that is there are now a lot more alternatives to fossil fuel, green investments that have price.
Right.
The costs of them have come down as an investment. But also I think there's a growing recognition that, the way I like to frame it is that the next 20 years for the fossil fuel industries are not going to be as profitable as the last 20 years. So it's kind of a matter of how do you manage that risk? Because I think it's a financial risk at the end of the day. You could say it's a political statement, but if you have an industry that you don't think is going to be as strong 10 years from now, you have to be thinking about what's your exposure to it and how are you sort of going to manage that exposure over time. So that, you know, and I think that is how investment professionals are thinking about it in Vermont. If you look at our exposure in the fund over time, it's come down and it's less than 2% at this point. They did agree, the VPIC has agreed to do a decarbonization program that will help across all of their investments, you know, think about the impact that they're having on the environment. So there was progress that came out of that discussion with S42. And I do think that they'll just by necessity, as managing financial risk, they're going to have to continue to think about how do they manage their exposure, even if there's not a legislative requirement to do so.
Excellent, interesting, because it was going on for quite a while.
Yeah.
Particularly strong, I think, last year or the year before. It was like
2 years ago was really strong.
It was bad.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, Tom Galanka, who's the head of, we are so fortunate that man is willing to do what he does for us.
Yeah.
And that's a great board, VPIC.
Yeah, no doubt.
I interviewed one of the members one time.
Oh, on your show?
Yeah, on my show, because he was a friend of somebody I knew, and I said, well, come on the show.
Nice.
And I felt so bad for Tom, because if we actually paid him right off the street.
Yeah, it'd be a lot more expensive.
It'd be a lot more expensive, and he is so bright. He's so good at this. I really like Tom.
Yeah, and they're very diligent about their work, because you know all those pension returns we talked about, and the improving liability ratio, funded ratio, and the decreasing liabilities, and how the rating agencies view that. You know, a lot of the pension reforms were putting more money into the system so that we could earn more money and save it on the back end. But you know, in order for that to work, you need to have good investment professionals, you know, managing the money well.
And that he is.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are very fortunate. So I'm trying to remember, when you were on last time, you were talking about climate infrastructure and climate change, and you have somebody in your department, if my memory, who's really kind of spearheading that effort. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, we have kind of two updates on that. One, I'll just mention, because you mentioned Sue Minter.
Oh, yes.
You know, we've hired Sue Minter in our office.
Great. I was wondering where she was. I'll have to track her down.
Yeah, she's on the state email now, Sue.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, good. I will go find her.
Yeah, so Sue, you know, she is going to be in charge of our work for the Climate Superfund. You know, this was something the legislature tasked us with, analyzing the cost of climate change and what the cost is to build a more resilient Vermont. So she's working on that in connection with the Climate Superfund legislation. And then we've been working on this climate resiliency implementation strategy that Ashlyn Doyon, who's a director in our office, that she's been working on that. And actually we're going to release that on Monday. So that's in partnership with ANR and the governor's office, identifying priorities around making Vermont more resilient. There were, you know, hundreds of priorities that were identified. We've tried to, you know, figure out which ones would have the biggest impact to start with, and then how do you fund those so that we can make progress on them.
Any discussion about fixing the flooding?
Yeah, well, that's the biggest issue.
Because I just expected to see a whole lot of activity in replacing
culverts
and making them bigger.
Yeah,
and
that has happened. Some of that has happened.
Has it? I haven't seen it, and the last time we had a flood, the same places were flooding. I said, what?
Yeah, you can't say that it's gotten to everywhere, but the point I like to make between Irene and you know, the 2023 flooding, there were a number of things that you can think about that the state has done in terms of making it more resilient. So in Irene, we had over 500 miles of state highway that was washed out. In the 2023 flooding, it was less than that, about 250 miles. Culverts washed out in Irene were over 1,000. This time it was more like 600. So still, you know, a number, but it was reduced.
Yeah.
But the big one was on bridges. We had over 30 bridges, state bridges, that were washed out in Irene, and just a small handful that were washed out in the 2023 floods. So those investments in resiliency, you know, the estimate is that for every dollar you put in for climate resiliency, it results in $6 of savings from not having to clean up whatever has happened. So prioritizing that's going to be, you know, really important.
Good, I'm glad to hear that, because I didn't see it, and I thought, given the disaster and the impact on people, I was figuring people would be out there. So I'm glad to hear they are.
Yeah.
Because my take is this state is so small that even if we did absolutely everything, we couldn't move that needle very much because we're just too small.
Oh, in terms of the climate impact.
Climate and all
Yeah.
that stuff. So I'd rather see the
Right.
money go to
Right.
the resiliency and be able to fight back with flooding and whatever else comes our way,
Yeah.
like tropical storm Irene.
No
That
doubt.
was the worst, I think,
Yeah.
from my perspective.
You know, there's a couple, it's an interesting conversation because there are a couple of things to think about, like on the reducing your carbon emission, you know, even if you don't make a big dent in the universe,
Right.
the world impact, you know, you can still be thinking about that in terms of how do you make energy costs more, less expensive for Vermonters
Yep.
and less volatile, right? So how do you make that less volatile or less expensive? But then to your point, I mean, climate change is here, it's happening to us. So we do have to, you know, make those investments
Yeah.
and try to protect people right now by being more resilient.
Yeah, I'm very glad to hear that because I was surprised that the legislature, I think it had one bill that had something to do with flooding, and I was expecting a whole lot more.
Yeah,
And I don't think that they did what I anticipated they were going to do with regard to getting us prepared for the next flood, which it will happen.
yeah, no doubt. And this report that we'll put out, we originally did it as our own initiative between our office and the governor's office and A&R, but the legislature did formalize it and request that we give them a report. So we anticipate legislation will come out of this report.
Oh, okay, great. Is the report on, will be on your website?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
we can get it?
Yeah, on Monday. Yeah.
Okay. So, we talked about the Investment Advisory Council, and that's Tom Galanka's group, and there's webinars that they do. They've done webinars for education purposes. Is that what they're up to?
Yeah.
I read something about they put in a webinar, and I thought, well, that's cool. I'd like to
Yeah.
know more about that.
Yeah, I'm sure that, I mean, you know, they're now, the Vermont
They're separate.
Invention and Pension Commission is now separate from our
Right.
office.
Oh, so-
we do serve on the board, you know,
Uh-huh.
I'm a board member, but yeah, if their educational opportunities are
And
important.
yeah, you should really check into that. I've always, you and I talked about this before, I always thought that they should teach stocks and bonds and
Oh, yeah.
investments in high school.
Yeah,
My idea was when you became a freshman, they give you, fake $10,000 or
Yeah.
something, and see what you can do through investments when you graduate. And if you graduate and make money, you get some kind of
yeah.
gold star or something.
Well, maybe
Just-
if you're the top person, you get scholarship.
There you go. Well,
Yeah.
that would be. I just think we don't know, and I've always felt that to be something I should have learned.
Yeah.
I did eventually on my own, but
Yeah, almost every year I go to Winooski High School where they have a financial literacy requirement. And, you know, every time I go, I'm really taken by the impact that financial literacy and teaching that sort of education can have on young people. I mean,
Yeah.
I remember going the first time and asked a student why they thought it was so important, and they said, well, you know, I have big plans for myself, and like I'm going to need to be able to
for him.
have a financial base to be able to make it happen, right? And you know, we went last year, and it was interesting. It wasn't intentionally set up this way, but there were two people that were presenting their final project to me, and one was talking about how she wanted to be a pediatric dermatologist, so very sort of specialized.
Yeah.
It was going to require, you know, her to go to college, medical school, residency, etc. She was going to be in her late 30s, and she was going to have this big salary, but she was only going to just be able to start saving for retirement, you know, and then
Yeah.
so on and so forth. She'd be 65 years old, and she'd have $4 million saved for retirement.
That's a good number.
But then the other young man was talking, and he said, you know, I want to be a master electrician. It requires this certificate. You know,
Right.
I'll start making this much more modest salary at age 19. I'll put money aside. At age 65, I'll retire with $4 million. Right? So they both got to the same
Excellent.
outcome,
Yeah.
but very different
Through
careers
the
and very
trades
different paths.
and education.
Yeah,
Very good.
and I think it makes them as young people not just think about even just stocks and bonds and all those kind of things, which is
Yeah.
important, but what do they invest in with their time, and what is it that they want to do with their career,
Yeah.
and knowing, oh, you know, if I decide 5 years in I don't enjoy being a pediatric dermatologist, there's a lot of risk to
Yeah,
taking
right,
that
right.
path. But if I'm a master electrician and I decide I want to go do something else, you know.
That's great.
So I think it's a really great program to just make them think about
Probably
their
learn
future.
all about Bitcoins. I had a college kid on my show last year. He was head of the Bitcoin committee group, whatever they called them, I had my mouth open the whole time.
Yeah.
I didn't know what the kid was talking about. But he was really excellent, and now there's interest in Washington with Bitcoins.
Yeah.
Our president has mentioned it more than once, so
Yeah, no
it's
doubt.
coming maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, we've had it on our radar for a long time, because when I was at DFR as the regulator, we had one of the largest, because we were focused on it from preventing fraud and protecting people and protecting consumers, because it's a highly unregulated area.
Yeah.
And we worry always about things that basically are the exact kind of things that were regulated, investment schemes that are just sort of now involving technology. So it looks like it's something different, but there's some elements of, a scheme that was been around since, the dawn of time. We had one of the largest settlements for cryptocurrency, I think ever, but it was the state of Vermont got a application, and one of the members of our team realized, hey, this should be a security, and it's not, and they raised it to, their superior, and they raised it to a lawyer, then a lawyer looked into it, brought in a number of other states, and then we brought in the SEC, and we ended up settling all of the 50 states and the SEC with the company for $100 million.
Whoa, and we promoted
and Vermont
it?
was the one that
Wow,
started
good
it. Yeah,
for us.
yeah,
Good for
yeah,
you guys.
yeah.
Huh.
But
I actually, not to be able to see it or feel it, it's just there.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a little tough to deal with.
So there are things that could be good with it. Anytime there's new technology, there's disruptions. It doesn't mean you don't want to embrace the technology.
Right.
But you just want to make sure people are protected and that it's well regulated. In the same way that you don't want to put your retirement money on a gambling table in Las Vegas.
Right.
Bitcoin is really volatile, and cryptocurrencies across the board are very volatile. So you got to be careful with what you're putting your money into and how much of it you're putting in.
For sure. Yeah, well, I'm not. Anyway, so the only other thing on my list, and I'll ask you to talk about whatever you'd like to, but we talked about, I still have my $25 in there.
Nice.
I should go, does it grow over time? It's been about 30 years.
No, you're losing money because it's not, it's not, there's no inflationary benefit there.
It was from a jeweler's.
Oh, okay.
I don't know where.
Well, next time we come on the show, I'll bring the check.
That's all right. It's been there for so long. But you have unclaimed properties. You do that once a year.
Yeah, it's been we do the unclaimed property. Every day somebody can claim their unclaimed property, right? We have unclaimed property day once a year, but we try to do a lot of things during the year to bring awareness to this program. We are excited that our year that just closed, we had the highest number of claims that we returned back to Vermonters, so over 30,000 claims back to Vermonters.
Wow.
One of the largest amounts of money back to Vermonters, about $10 million, and that's
somebody missed they didn't miss $10 million?
The total amount of all the claims.
I would have checked on that.
Yeah, but there are some that are hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Wow.
So those are record numbers, the most amount of claims, the most amount of aggregate money that we've returned back to Vermonters. One of the other things we did was make permanent a pilot program called the Money Back Program. So we work with the tax department to match up our data with their data. Perfect. And then automatically send people a check and a letter that says, you have unclaimed property with our office. Here's your check for $200.
That's great.
Yeah, so we'll do that again this fall.
Nice.
And I think that's a great way of getting money back into people's pockets.
That'll be a surprise, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure by that, I just mentioned it because I don't think about it. Except when you're on the show, I think, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
$25 there.
Well, it's people. It's Vermonters' money. It's their money. It's better in their pocketbook than in our bank account. The story that I like to tell is about, now it's been about 18 months ago, but I went down to Putney for their town meeting, and we always bring the unclaimed property list with us for that particular town. So we print it out and we have it.
Great.
I was flipping through it the night before. I went down to Brattleboro to stay with my parents, and there was one claim that was for $38,000, right? So I was looking through, and this one stood out to me. It's such a large number. And I asked my dad, hey, do you know this person? And he goes, yeah, I've been doing his taxes for 40 years. So I said, oh, well,
Dad.
Can you give me his contact information? Yeah. And so I called the next day on my way to the town meeting and said,
oh my God.
His daughter answered. He didn't answer, his daughter answered. And I said, this is Mike Pieciak. I'm the state treasurer. I have $38,000 for your dad. And, she thought it was a scam. And then,
right.
they talked to, she talked to her siblings, and all the siblings in Vermont finally got comfortable that it wasn't a scam because they knew who I was.
Right.
But the sibling that
They
lived
knew your dad. Probably,
yeah,
right?
but the sibling that lived out of state was convinced it was a scam, But in any event, they got comfortable. We sent them the check. We got a nice note back from the dad. He was 98 years old.
Oh, wow.
And he said that he was a former doctor, like a local doctor, and he said that made for a great Easter and this sort of thing. But then we got a note from his daughter like a couple of weeks later who said, we didn't know about this money, we didn't know it was there, we never would have looked for it, we never would have claimed it, and the fact that we have it now means that our dad can't afford to live in his house for another year. Right at 98 years old.
Right.
That was really
That's
really
lovely.
meaningful.
What a great story.
Yeah, so not everyone's going to have $38,000, but whatever that amount is, that makes a difference.
How you get to that point where you forget you have $38,000 sitting around?
Yeah.
Where is it?
Well, in this case, it was which is oftentimes with the larger amounts, it's a life insurance policy.
Oh,
that,
matured or something?
Yeah, maybe you signed up for it when you started work and then you kind of forgot about it or something, or your spouse didn't know about it or whatever it might be. So, yeah.
That's a lot of work, though, that you have to put in. Is it for 7 years? Is that when they have to turn, like a company has to turn money?
Yeah, really.
I was involved in that at the Merchants Bank.
Yeah, oh yeah.
We hit the 7-year mark. We were all looking through files and doing whatever.
Depends on the type of industry or business, but it can be as quick as 2 years to turn it over to us. But it might be for a safety deposit box, might be longer.
I don't know where 7 popped in. It's just
well, it could be. For some things, it is longer.
Yeah, I don't know.
But like for merchants, they would turn over
every 2 years.
a check, or let's say that you issued a check to somebody and they never cashed it, you'd send it to our office eventually. If there was a bank account that was dormant, after a certain period of time, you turn it over to us. If there's a safety deposit box where they stopped paying and nobody checked in on it, the contents of the safety deposit box will come to our office. So we have both cash, and we have stocks, and we have physical items as well in our office.
Do you ever open them to see what's in there? Or
Yeah.
You're not allowed to? Or?
No, we do because we want to. No, when they give us the contents of the box, we'll take an inventory of it. Because just for insurance purposes, we'll want to know what do we have on our hands.
And to protect yourselves, too.
Yeah, exactly.
Because somebody could claim there was
$1
million in there, and where'd it go?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, you have so much going on. What's we actually just have a few seconds left, and we covered most of it, I think.
Nice.
You have done a marvelous job, and we always feel good that you're there.
Well, I appreciate that, Pat. Thank you. Yeah, I love serving in Vermont. I was talking about my mom, and really both my parents just gave me the example of wanting to be in public service, to give back to the community, be involved. They did that. That was the example they set for me. They both told me in their own ways how much the community had done for them and how they felt there was a responsibility to give back to the community, and that's just simply what I'm trying to do.
As they say in Vermont, right?
Yeah.
That's cool. Thank you very much, Mike. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. This is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is listening beyond the soundbite. See you next week.